Many years ago, in the beautiful city of Kigali, lived a woman named Nana who had a full voice, complete vocal cords, and correct pronunciation. Yet, in her own house, her words had no seat or chair, not even a small stool to perch on, because in that house, conversation was not for everybody. It was for one man and one man alone. Her husband, Jean Paul, a man who loved the sound of his own voice, the way a preacher loves microphone. If you met Jean Paul outside and asked, "How are you?" You had already made a mistake, because if what you wanted was just greeting, what you would get was a lecture. He would adjust his trousers, clear his throat, and begin from how the economy is affecting everybody. Then move to how men are not respected anymore. Branch into how he is the only one holding his family together. Then conclude with, "But we thank God." A summary that came after 10 minutes of unnecessary explanation. If you tried to leave halfway, he would hold your hand and say, "Wait now, I have not finished," as if your time belonged to him by birthright. That was the man Nana married. Now, Nana did not enter the marriage empty. Let nobody say she was dull. She was educated. She understood things. She noticed details people ignored. She had sense like a government official. But she also had one problem. She believed that respect would create space for her. She thought if she spoke gently, then people would listen gently. She did not know that she had entered a house where volume determined value. In the early days of marriage, she tried. Let it be on record that Nana tried. One evening, as they were eating, she said, "Jean Paul, I think we should reduce spending small so we can say." Jean Paul raised his hand like a traffic officer and cut in, "Wait!" Unfortunately, that wait was not temporary. Records have it that it lasted for 3 hours. He continued eating, drank water, cleared his throat, and then began. "You see, the problem with people is that they do not understand planning," he said, as if she had not just spoken about planning. Then he spoke for so long that even the food became tired, and by the time he finished, Nana forgot what she wanted to say in the first place, not because she was confused, but because the environment had rejected her contribution. Another day, she tried again. "Jean Paul, that land your brother mentioned, my brother knows what he's doing." Jean Paul cut in immediately, not even allowing her sentence to reach the land. Then he leaned back, stretched his leg, and began another explanation that nobody asked for. And Nana sat there nodding like someone attending a seminar she did not register for. Unfortunately for her, it was not only Jean Paul. Visitors too understood the system quickly. If they came to the house and there was a conversation, if Nana made the mistake of adding her voice, just small, just to contribute like a normal human being, somebody would say, "Yes, yes, we hear you," which in that house meant, "Please keep quiet." Then the person would continue talking as if she had only coughed. One of Jean Paul's friends was worse. That one believed Nana was part of the furniture. One afternoon, he said, "Nana, bring water for me, please." She brought the water, placed it on the table, and then tried to speak. "Please, I think..." But the man raised his hand without even looking at her. "We are talking." Wow, talking, as if she came to sing. Nana stood there for 2 seconds, then nodded and walked away. That was the structure she found herself in. Even on the phone, the suffering continued. Her own friends would call her, "Nana, this man is stressing me." They would then go on to talk for 15 minutes, complain, cry, explain, and then say, "What do you think?" But before Nana would even inhale to answer, they would cut the call. "Okay, let me call you back." Well, they never called back, and it became normal for them. Everything about Nana was useful except her voice. In that house, she was the system. She would wake early, prepare food, Arrange things, remember dates, and fix mistakes before they became problems. If Jean Paul forgot something, Nana would remember it. If something was missing, Nana would replace it. If confusion was coming, Nana would start solving it quietly. But nobody noticed because she did not announce it. She did not carry a microphone to say, "See what I have done, oh." She simply did it, and that was her second mistake, because in that house, what is quiet is invisible. One evening, Jean-Paul came back home angry. He threw his bag on the chair and shouted, "These people in the office don't understand anything." Nana came out from the kitchen and asked, "What happened?" Jean-Paul sat down and began the full narration. Everything that happened from morning till evening, including what did not concern the story. Nana listened and nodded. Then, when she said, "Maybe next time you can try to," Jean-Paul stood up immediately and snapped, "Let me handle my work." Nana paused, looked at him and nodded. Okay, that was how conversation died in that house, with consistent professional interruption. One evening, Jean-Paul called a family meeting, and in that house, once you gather uncles and aunties with free time and strong opinions, you are not calling a meeting, no, you are inviting noise. They came in numbers. Uncles that believe age automatically meant wisdom. Aunties that believe volume meant authority. One cousin that did not understand the topic but came to support shouting. Even one man nobody could properly identify followed and sat down as if his inheritance was inside the discussion. The topic was serious. It was about money and land. Jean-Paul sat in the middle like the chairman of a board that had never succeeded in anything but arguments. He kept on adjusting himself, clearing his throat and nodding as if he had already solved everything before the meeting even started. Nobody should talk over another person, he said. Well, that was the first lie of the evening, because immediately he finished, one uncle began, "You see, this land issue." Another uncle cut in, "No, you are not starting from the beginning. I am starting from where it matters." "No, it does not matter." "No, it matters." Within 2 minutes, structure died and the meeting became a market. Meanwhile, Nana sat quietly, not because she did not have anything to say, but because she had already understood the environment. She had been listening, observing, and calculating. She had seen the documents earlier and had noticed a very small but dangerous mistake. This kind of mistake does not shout until it had caused a brutal damage. She saw a signature that did not align, a date that did not make sense, and a name that appeared twice where it should not. She knew something was wrong, big wrong. So she waited patiently, because she knew if she spoke at the wrong time, her voice would be buried under unnecessary confidence. Voices continued to rise as the relatives leaned forward as if they were about to fight for a land that was not even theirs yet. One aunt clapped her hands loudly and said, "This is an opportunity." Another shook her head and said, "No, this is trouble." One uncle said, "If we don't buy now, we will regret it though." Another replied, "If we buy now, we will cry later." Nobody was even listening. They were just performing. Jean-Paul raised his voice. "Please, one person should talk." Then he continued talking. Nana sat patiently, waiting for a gap when everybody would inhale at the same time. Miraculously, everybody suddenly paused at once, and Nana grabbed it. She adjusted herself and opened her mouth. "Maybe we should check." Immediately, Jean-Paul raised his hand like a barrier and shunned her. "Let elders talk." The room responded instantly. They all burst into annoying laughter. One uncle leaned back and said, "These small voices should rest." Another one added, "Nana, you are too calm for this kind of discussion." One aunt laughed. "This is not a kitchen matter, Nana." The words entered like kerosene. Nana paused. Her sentence remained incomplete, hanging in the air. She looked at Jean-Paul, but he did not look back. He had already continued speaking. "As I was saying, That was the moment Nana decided to switch off, like a system that had realized it was no longer needed. She nodded and smiled, but that smile was not agreement, it was withdrawal. She adjusted herself, sat back properly, and went quiet permanently. The meeting continued loud and directionless. One uncle was now explaining land law he did not fully understand. Another was narrating a story from 1996 that had no connection to the matter. One aunt was warning them about enemies. Another one was warning them about government. There was noise everywhere. At some point, someone casually asked, "Nana, what do you think?" But it was too late. Nana did not answer. And one uncle even said, "Leave her, she does not like talking." Jean Paul nodded, yes. And that yes finalized everything, because now her silence had been accepted officially. The meeting dragged on and ended without conclusion. People just stood up, still arguing confidently. One uncle said as he left, "This thing is simple now." Another one said, "We will finalize it." Nana quietly carried the plate and entered the kitchen while no one noticed, because the meeting had already decided whose voice mattered, and Nana was not part of that list. Later that night, Young Paul stretched on the chair, satisfied. "That went well," he said. Nana passed behind him, paused, then looked at him and went to the bedroom without a word. The next morning, Nana did not greet normally with the usual good morning. She only nodded small, like someone acknowledging existence but not participating in it. Jean Paul noticed immediately, because he was used to service disguised as love. He was used to attention that arranged his life quietly. So he paused and looked at her properly for the first time that morning. Then he frowned. "Why are you acting like this?" Nana smiled and still said nothing. Jean Paul waited for a few seconds, expecting more, or at least one sentence that would allow him respond like a man in control. But nothing came, so he shrugged women, then picked up his phone and walked away, as if the matter had already expired. But it had not expired. In fact, it had just started. Day 2 came and Nana moved around the house as usual, swept, arranged, cooked, washed, and did everything required. But the difference was not in what she did, it was in how she did it. Before, her actions were attentive and corrective, but now everything was done with accuracy but without involvement, like a worker following instructions instead of a person building a system. Jean Paul noticed again. He felt that something was off. He casually said, "Good morning." Nana nodded again. He paused and waited, then he frowned. "You are still doing like this?" Nana smiled and still said nothing. Jean Paul shook his head. "This one is new," he muttered, then continued with his morning, believing time would solve what he refused to understand. And then day 3 arrived with energy. Well, not good energy, because now even the walls of the house had started noticing the difference. That morning, as Jean Paul prepared for work, he opened his wardrobe and stood there confused, because what he saw was not arranged the way it used to. His shirts were still there, including the trousers, but the logic was missing. He picked one shirt, blue color. Then he picked one trousers, green color with orange patterns. He held them up and paused. Something inside him whispered, "This is not correct," but that voice was weak, because the stronger voice of Nana that used to guide his fashion sense was silent. He wore it and stood in front of the mirror. He turned left, turned right, but he was still not sure. He stepped out and asked, "Nana, how does this look?" Nana looked up briefly and saw everything. She saw the confusion and the mistake. Then she nodded, which meant fine. Jean Paul smiled in satisfaction. He left the house confidently dressed like a walking argument. However, at the office, the problem introduced itself properly. One colleague looked at him, paused and looked again, and he joked, "Chairman, are you attending two events today?" Jean-Paul frowned. "What do you mean?" The man pointed, "Your clothes are negotiating," and immediately burst into sharp laughter that removed small respect from a man's shoulder. Jean-Paul smiled awkwardly and muttered, "It is fashion." But inside, he was melting from shame. That evening, he returned home and immediately asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" Nana looked at him confused. He repeated, "Why didn't you tell me about my clothes?" Nana nodded slightly and smiled, which meant they looked fine. Jean-Paul stared in confusion because something about that answer did not sit well, but he could not explain it, so he left it. Consequently, day 4 came with loss. That morning, Jean-Paul started to look for a document, an urgent work document. He opened one drawer, but nothing was there. He opened the second drawer, still nothing was there. He bent down and checked under the bed, the table, rug, everywhere, but he couldn't find it. Panic gripped him. He called out, "Nana!" She came and stood in front of him. "I am looking for my document, the brown file." She looked at him, then looked at the table, then looked back at him and shook her head. Jean-Paul blinked. "But you arranged it." Nana nodded in agreement, and Jean-Paul waited for her to swing into action because normally that yes would be followed by solution. But this time nothing followed. He asked again, "Where is it?" But she calmly shook her head in confusion. Jean-Paul stared at her like someone who had just been told the truth in a language he did not understand. He searched again angrily and turned everywhere upside down. Finally, after a long struggle, he found it squeezed inside the bag he carried 2 days ago. It was crushed, disorganized, and useless. He left the house angry. Unfortunately, at work, the problem matured because the document he finally found was incomplete and because he had missed a meeting the previous day since nobody reminded him. That evening, he returned home tired and frustrated. By day 5, Nana served him food without asking for his taste preference. That morning, she cooked rice and stew. But as he ate, he paused. Something felt different. He asked, "Nana, did you cook this?" She nodded. He took another spoon and said, "Something is missing." She looked at him for more explanation, but he opened his mouth and closed it because he did not know what exactly was wrong. Before, Nana used to adjust salt before he spoke. Before, she used to ask him what he preferred. But now, she only served. He finally said, "Nothing, it is fine," and continued eating, swallowing his dissatisfaction. On day 6, Jean-Paul had a very important meeting at work that could move his career forward or backward. He woke up that morning and moved around casually because in his mind, there was no need for urgency. He left the house peacefully, walked into the office and sat down relaxed. Then someone entered and said, "Sir, the meeting." Jean-Paul froze. "What meeting?" The man blinked. "The one you scheduled." Jean-Paul's heart dropped. He checked his time and sighed in frustration because he had missed it. At home that evening, he did not speak immediately. He just watched carefully as Nana moved around, cleaned, cooked, and arranged everything. He called Nana. She turned. He asked, "Are you angry?" Nana smiled and shook her head. Jean-Paul frowned. "Then why are you behaving like this?" She looked at him and shrugged innocently. At this point, Jean-Paul was more confused than before because truly she was acting normal apart from talking. But sadly, normal was not enough. Before, Nana was not just present, she was active. In fact, she was the system. But now, she just sat there and the house was feeling it fully. Things were not working well because the system had logged out, and unfortunately, Jean-Paul did not yet know how to log it back in. Until the main issue happened, Jean-Paul had gone ahead with the land deal confidently. He signed and transferred money to the people. He did not ask Nana or even remember that she had tried to say something because in his mind, everything made sense. the day he signed it. He returned home with unnecessary energy and called, "Nana!" She came out calmly. He proudly said, "It is done. The land, I have secured it." Nana nodded, and that was all. She was not even excited, just nod. John Paul paused slightly because that reaction did not match his expectation, but pride covered the gap quickly. "You will see," he said, smiling. "This one will change everything." Nana nodded again. For 2 weeks, there was peace until a phone call came in. "Sir, there is a small issue." Jean-Paul frowned. "What issue?" "Just clarification." "Clarify it now," Jean-Paul replied confidently. The man hesitated and then said, "The land documents." Jean-Paul cut him off. "It is fine." He ended the call confidently. A second call came in and this man said, "Sir, the document has conflicts." Jean-Paul frowned again. "What conflicts?" "The ownership, sir." Jean-Paul laughed. "It is impossible." And he ended the call. The third call came in and this one said, "Sir, you have a problem." Now that sentence entered his ear properly, and for the first time he began to check. He opened the file and looked again properly this time. The mistake was now shining boldly in front of him, undeniable. The signature looked wrong. The name was duplicated. The land was not clean, which meant the money. The money! Jean-Paul sat down slowly in shock. Unfortunately, it was too late. That evening, he did not announce anything yet. He walked into the house quietly, sat down and looked at nothing. Nana passed. He looked at her and then looked away. It was the next day that the problem fully matured. Another family appeared claiming ownership of the land. They brought out stronger and older documents and even involved lawyers. Now, the land was in dispute and the money was trapped. Jean-Paul could not sleep properly that night. The next day, he called for another meeting. However, this one was different. It was still with the same people, but not the same energy. There was no confidence or laughter or unnecessary authority. Only confusion and tension sat with the uncles and aunties. Jean-Paul stood in the middle again, and this time his voice did not sound strong. He began, "There is a small issue." One uncle leaned forward. "What issue is that?" Jean-Paul paused and then said it. The land has problem." A heavy silence dropped, then noise followed. "I said it. You people did not listen. Who brought this deal? You rushed it. You did not verify." Blame moved quickly like fire and touched everybody. One aunt shook her head. "This is serious." So another one added, "Money has entered." Another voice said, "How much, Seth?" Jean-Paul mentioned the amount, and this time everybody felt it. Then the question started. "Did you check properly? Who confirmed it? Why did you rush?" Jean-Paul answered them weakly. Then suddenly, one aunt paused, looked around and then said, "Wait, Nana, did you notice anything?" At that moment, complete silence fell and all eyes turned to Nana, who sat there quietly, exactly the same way she had been sitting in the previous meeting. Jean-Paul looked at her, then he stood up slowly and moved closer. "Nana." She looked at him. "Nana, say something now," he said, but she remained quiet. Jean-Paul begged, "Nana, please." That word "please" came out effortlessly. Suddenly, everybody now understood that they needed her voice, but it was no longer available. One uncle shifted in his chair and said, "This is not the time to keep quiet." So Nana did not even look at him. One aunt added, "Speak, my daughter." Still, she said nothing. The meeting that once rejected her voice was now begging for it. That night, Jean-Paul did not sleep. He kept turning and tossing because every time he tried to settle, the scene of Nana opening her mouth in that meeting, him raising his hand, cutting her off, and people laughing kept replaying in his head. The house felt empty functionally. He sat up slowly and looked at Nana. She was lying down with her eyes open. He moved closer carefully like someone approaching something fragile and said, "Nana, I am sorry." She said nothing. He shifted and tried again. I should have listened. I did not know you were holding everything together. But all he got was silence, and that was what began to punish him, because apology without response feels like talking to a wall that understands but refuses to help. From then on, Jean-Paul started doing things himself because he had no choice. In the morning, he entered the kitchen and looked around aimlessly. Before, things used to move without confusion, but now everything looked like it had too many options and he didn't know which one to choose. Finally, he picked rice, measured it badly, washed it like someone rinsing clothes, put it on fire and added water without thinking. Then he covered it and left it, but the rice did not cooperate with him. It came out confused, half soft, half hard, like it could not decide what it wanted to be. Jean-Paul tasted it, paused and frowned at the pot. This thing, he muttered. Still, he ate it because hunger does not respect pride. Nana passed by, looked at the plate and looked at him but said nothing. That silence was louder than insults. The next day, Jean-Paul sat with his notebook and tried to arrange things. Before, Nana used to remind him about small things or important things, but now everything depended on him. He forgot one call, missed another and scheduled two things at the same time. Then he arrived late to one meeting and did not show up for the other. Confusion followed him like a shadow. One evening, after another long day of small failures that accumulated into one big frustration, Jean-Paul entered the house, dropped his bag, sat down heavily and then covered his face with both hands. He stayed like that for a very long time. Then he stood up and walked to where Nana was sitting. He paused, then suddenly knelt down slowly. Nana, please talk, he begged. He looked and sounded tired and frustrated at the same time. Nana looked at him properly as a person. Then she spoke. Are you tired now? Jean-Paul blinked and quickly replied, yes. Nana nodded. That is how it has been. You are just noticing it because you are the one doing it now. Jean-Paul swallowed hard. I did not know. Nana shrugged. How would you know? You did not ask. Jean-Paul lowered his head. I am asking now. Nana looked at him and then said something painful. That land issue, I saw it that day. Jean-Paul's eyes widened immediately. What did you see? She looked at him and said, the paper was not correct. Jean-Paul's chest tightened. Why didn't you say it? Nana held his gaze. I tried. Jean-Paul's mouth opened and closed because he remembered that moment fully. He looked away in regret. Nana continued. After that day, I stopped trying. Jean-Paul nodded slowly because there was nothing to argue or defend. Nana added, I cannot fix everything for you. Jean-Paul nodded again. I know. Then Nana stood up and walked to the kitchen to continue life, while Jean-Paul remained on the floor for a moment. Then he stood up slowly because now he understood that if the person who sees the problem is not allowed to speak, the problem will speak later by itself and it will not be polite. Hi besties, thank you so much for watching the story. The story is dedicated to our bestie Nana, whose birthday is today. Happy birthday, dear Nana. May your life be filled with so much sweetness. May your voice be heard in places that matter. And may you gain favor. Dear besties, please, let's wish her well in the comment section. If you know you enjoyed the story, kindly share the story out with your loved ones and give the story a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you've not done so by now. Until I bring another story your way. Bye.